Hi, I'm Paul. For this video, I'm going to talk about how thoughts can get in the way of us seeing consciousness. I'm going to have to break down some of these ideas like consciousness. So we can look at consciousness as being the whole, everything. But it's everything seen as a whole and not fragmented into parts like what thought does. So we can look at universal consciousness, which is everything. But let's just say I look at that tree, and as long as I have no thoughts, just sight, and I see a whole picture of the tree. But then when I try to label it, try to describe it, I break it down into just one description in my head. You see, this is thought. And the whole of consciousness seems to narrow down just to this thought. Let me explain that a little bit more. So the other day, I was lying in bed and I was listening to some rain sounds on a speaker. It also had thunder. And I was listening to it and it was quite realistic sound. And I was enjoying it. But every time I tried to focus on the thunder, I seemed to lose this space. Well, this space is something that I noticed a while ago in my awakening. I seem to be able to gain more space, and I'll try and explain that a little bit more. So when I look at the tree, without any words, I see the tree. And the tree is over there. And in between the tree and me, there's some space. At the very moment I add a word to it, and I start to focus on the description of a word that's in my head. So you see, me in my head is trying to focus on something in my head, and therefore there's no space. It's only when we try to observe things as they are, without any reactions or descriptions, then we create a space. This is what it was like listening to the thunderstorm on my speaker, because it wasn't true, it wasn't real. There was a conflict in my head that I knew I was listening to something secondhand. And therefore I was focusing on it inside of my head, which then enclosed this space to me in my head focusing on my head. So looking at consciousness being everything out there, which then gets corrupted by thought, which is in my head, and therefore I'm not focusing on the truth, the whole, or consciousness. I'm just focusing on a description in my head, therefore I can't see what is out there without a division in my head. So moving away from the consciousness of the whole out there, let's look at the consciousness of myself. So the consciousness of myself is the whole of me. Memories, thoughts, my body, everything. We could say that consciousness really is just the whole picture, not fragmented, not broken down. So then how is it that we struggle to see the whole picture of ourselves? in a whole. We can say this is through thought, perhaps the ego. I've said in one of my other videos that the unconscious mind isn't really a thing. It's not supposed to be there. But we created it. We created it by fragmenting and dividing memories. Things we want to see, things we don't want to see, things that we should do and shouldn't do. All these divisions. You see, when we divide something, we can't see them both. This is cognitive dissonance. Very stressful. So we divide it into the seen and unseen. So we break down the whole of our memories and turn them into the conscious and the unconscious. So then we can say, who does this? Who is it who breaks down these memories? And then we suggest that would be the ego, the I. Many of us believe the ego is an illusion. Perhaps we believe that it's me. Some of us say that it doesn't exist, but it certainly does seem to. So we can say that the ego is perhaps the thought maker, the thought chooser, the memory chooser. Something that chooses what I want to see and what I don't want to see, which is what creates a division in our mind. When you really look at it, is it not anything different to thought? Is it the same as thought? So the thought maker, which seems to be separate to thought, that makes the choices of thought, really is just thought itself. So then we could say, well, does this thought maker, which is only thought, choose what my next thought is? But then how can thought choose another thought? So it's this thought maker which seems to create a division, maybe? That's what it looks like in our memories of what we choose to look at in our memories and what we don't choose to look at. See, I don't think this is the case. You see, the thought maker, the ego, the thought chooser, is just a thought. And I think that it's just the first thought, which then starts the ball rolling to the next thought. And the next thought follows the first thought, and so on. So if I say, or I think a thought, I'm stupid, and the next thought is going to follow the line of I'm stupid. And then the ball keeps on rolling in that direction. So then I want to find a thought that can take my distraction away from this progression in this direction. So I try to find something positive, which is just another thought, which a thought maker tries to start the ball rolling in the opposite direction, tries to cling on to that thought process and hope that it could drift me away from these negative thoughts. So perhaps something happens. A friend phones up, gives me some interesting news, and then I could grab onto that, and then the thought maker grabs onto that, creates a more positive thought, and that starts the ball rolling in that direction. So then we could say the first initial thought can be triggered off. by environment. And then we cling on to that and hope that we go in that direction. So looking at it in this way, it seems that we don't really have any control over the thought. Perhaps the illusion is the thought that we have the control by thinking. So in a sense, we could say the thoughts, even the thought maker of the original thought, is control. It's trying to find something to follow, finding a direction to go. Perhaps start off a first thought and then we could go in that direction, and trying to control the more positive direction, away from negative. But I think overall what it's really trying to control is just to keep on moving away from the unconscious, the things we don't want to think about. Perhaps because our unconscious is a mess, never been looked at, never been filed correctly. And then there's the environment. We need to fit in. And some of our thoughts and memories in our unconscious don't fit us in with the people around, circumstances. So we can say that the thoughts, trying to cling on to something, to start the ball rolling in a certain direction. Is this what we call seeking? So then we try to find a positive direction by trying to find religion, spirituality, the next person who sounds like they might be telling me something important or giving me hope in the future. And then this starts the ball rolling of the thought pattern of perhaps there will be hope if I cling on to this. So then we could see that all of these thoughts sending us in different directions, continuously taking us away from our unconscious, making a separation between what we want to see and what is really there, which is the division. This division is the separation, start of the separate self. Having the belief that this separate self is controlling the future to make things better. When we really look at it, it only gives us temporary relief. You see, we start the ball rolling off in a positive way, and then we have positive thoughts coming in. This is still a movement, and it's fragile. Because it only needs one negative thought to then trigger it off, going in the opposite direction. So the illusion of trying to chase happiness, the next spiritual teacher, religion or whatever else, is the same action. There's all the negative thoughts and negative beliefs that we have. So chasing something which is positive puts us onto a maybe pedestal of hope, and just then to be knocked back down again. So if the idea is not to move in thought in either direction, because moving in thought in either direction just gives a false sense of control. Thinks that it gives us security, when really it doesn't. You see, clinging on to hope can be shattered. And if something can be shattered, then that means the security is failed. So I think the idea is to get rid of the thoughts which try to lead us away from the thing we're running away from, which is the unconscious mind. Unconscious mind is continuously showing us what is the truth. And we don't want to see it. Maybe we don't want to see it because we want the belief of something else. I was just thinking earlier on about thoughts. I was trying to look into my head and look at what all thoughts are. Just stare at them. And I was trying to ask my question, is there a single thought, any thought that I can have that isn't about me or about control? So I can say I have to do this, or how am I supposed to do this? Whilst making a meal, I would say, what do I need to do next? Tried to find any thought that didn't lead into the future. I couldn't think of one. I'm not saying that there isn't one. Perhaps there is. In fact, I did think of one, possibly, when I speak to people and they talk about this sort of thing face to face, and they come up with a suggestion, and I think, this isn't quite right. And then I think to myself, how can I explain this in a way that would be understood? And I've used the word I. I do wonder if there is any thoughts that we can have which aren't about future, aren't about control. Whether that any of these thoughts are actually in use for helping us do anything, or more just giving us the appearance that we're making the choices of how to do or what to do. Perhaps I need to work on that a little bit more. Anyway, I think that's all I've got to say. So, thanks very much for listening.